Welcome to BALTIC Landlords, an international broadcast about real estate development, property management, and income sustainability. I'm your host, David Sved, and my guest today is Mārtiņš Vanags, Managing Director of the Alliance of Real Estate Developers in Latvia. Mārtiņ, welcome to BALTIC Landlords.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a general look at the real estate market. The past 2 years have been a true roller coaster in many business sectors, but especially for real estate developers. From the global pandemic and the war in Ukraine to higher material prices and increased interest rates from banks. What is your take on the overall picture and real estate market sentiment right now?
Well, that's $1 million question, as I say. I mean, you mentioned the period of 2 years. I think COVID started, wasn't it like almost 3 years ago?
2.5, yeah.
Yes, so basically I think there are 4 major factors that we should factor in when determining the sentiment of real estate investors and developers. Well, chronologically, you can start with with COVID, obviously, which was a major disruption. Connected to COVID is the situation in which remote work arose, which made an impression, affected the office segment. And then we have, especially in the Latvian context, but in the whole European context, the spike of construction prices, the inflation in construction, which in Latvia's case reached almost 40%, not annually, but for the entire period.
Yeah.
And now what we have is obviously interest rates, Euribor, and so. And as one may notice, neither one of these factors is positive for the real estate industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, for instance, if you look at COVID, how it affected retail, I had the privilege or the fate to represent the big shopping centers, which took a major hit regarding their revenue, and during COVID, and Latvian government was smart enough to put in place a support scheme for compensate some of the revenue lost due to COVID. So and of course after COVID and due to lockdowns, remote work emerged, and what we saw in terms of office occupancy, it was a very, very stressful time for developers and investors. Now we see that people are basically back to offices.
The good ones.
Well, the good. I mean, since everybody now quotes Elon Musk, and I think he was quoted saying that if you want to pretend that you work, you can work remotely, but if you want really to kind of do your job, you must come back to office. Yeah, and in terms of construction prices, I already mentioned that basically it was like before Ukraine. I know of several developers who basically had they had to hire their general contractor, and basically their plan was to do the development for 100 euros, and the offers which they got was 140 euros on average.
Yeah.
So this is something like it is hard to deal with in normal times. But but if this was a residential project, so you have like a 40% spike in construction prices, which is like reflected directly into how much an apartment costs. And if you add to that the spike in Euribor, which basically has made made like mortgages, the installment payment for mortgages like plus 30%. So basically plus 40% in construction prices and plus 30% in terms of how credit is available. Then what you get is basically if you speak, for instance, about like economy housing in Riga. So let's take a 40 square meter apartment, small apartment for like a 1 or 2 person people household. So your mortgage payment for that kind of apartment was like 1.5 years ago, 300 euros per month. Now, for the same size of apartment, you pay 600 euros because the price of the apartment has risen by 40%, and your mortgage has risen by 30%. So it's just like 1.5 years ago it was 300, now it's 600, which in the case of Latvia has basically led to a major sort of shrinkage, if I may use a word, of housing affordability. And of course this in turn affects how developers are thinking about new investment in housing, and so basically, I mean, I think that economy residential in Latvia and in the whole Baltics, due to the spike in construction prices and availability of credit is seriously affected. There are mechanisms to compensate for that, but we can return to that. Offices are doing basically better than they did 2 years ago. I think one probably the sector which has gained slightly gained from these developments throughout the last 3 years is logistics and warehouses, which are experiencing let's say good times because of the development of e-commerce, and so there you need like logistics and delivery, and so I mean hotels. I don't know, hotels probably are back. You hear about some hotel developments in Riga and in other major Baltic cities. So I mean, this is how it looks. A bit uneven for different real estate segments, and probably we are expecting, as we speak, what is today's year, the mid 2023. Probably we are expecting a year of sort of soft stagnation for the next 12 months to come, until probably Europe, until interest rates will be lowered.
Back to normal.
Back to what is normal? That's interesting. I actually asked ChatGPT what normal interest rates were, and its response was that obviously you have to factor in the economic development. Is it recession, or is it like a period of growth? And there is no normal for. But probably we will not be back to a situation. We will not return to a situation when the capital was essentially available for free. Probably not 1 year, not 2 years.
Okay. Tell us more about the real estate development market in Latvia specifically. Who are the main market movers, so to speak? Maybe you can outline the companies or countries which hold the largest shares of the real estate market in Latvia.
Well, that's an interesting question, because in my organization, the Alliance of Real Estate Developers, we have as our members 40 real estate developers and investors. And of these 40, I think 37 or 38 are foreign investors. So that's interesting. Let's say in contrast to sectors like construction, or perhaps food production, and so where there is sort of a serious component of Latvian investors in Latvian capital, real estate is clearly dominated by foreign investors. Usually people think that there is some Russian presence, or has been some Russian presence in the real estate market. I must tell you that I haven't noticed any Russian presence like throughout the last 5-6 years in the Latvian real estate sector, because, well, this is clearly dominated. There is this sort of the small circle, and there is this wider circle. The small circle is Estonian and Lithuanian investors, and the wider circle is Finnish, so investors from Finland, and Swedish investors. If you look at what the largest companies are in the real estate sector, let's say you can start with residential, with Resi as we call it. Well, you have Bonava, which is a Swedish company. Then you have YIT, which is a Finnish company. Then you have Marks, or Marko as they call themselves in Estonia, which is an Estonian company. Whereas there was Honor, which was or is a Lithuanian company, but not active in the Latvian market anymore. So there is AFI, which is a company from Israel, which develops the Trebu home project, and so. So these are basically, of course, there are some newcomers like Hepsor and Kamos from Estonia, and which do residential, because of quality residential projects. In terms of office developments, you have both developers and investment funds which are active. So basically developers are those who take upon themselves the initial risk of development, where basically everything that can go wrong may go wrong. That is all that is connected with project design, with construction, and with commissioning of the properties. And so these are developers. Developers usually rent out the premises, and then this object is no more just a building, but it's a cash flow product, an investment product, and that is when investment funds usually step in and acquire that property for cash flow purposes. So in terms of office developers, we have like Capitalica, which developed Verde. We have Capital, which develops Elemental Skanste. We have Pillar, one of the few local companies which develops this Pillar's office in New Hansa in Skanste. You have Precisnams, which is developed by Lords LB, which is both a developer and a fund. You have Mūkusavas Business Centers, another, let's say, Latvian developer. You have Galio, which develops properties in VEF, and so. And in terms of, so these are mainly developers. There is some overlap with investment funds. And then there is, of course, investment funds like Eften, which is also a developer, but basically an investment fund. I think the first Baltic fund, which has more than 1 billion in assets under management in the Baltics. You have SJ Capital, a new Latvian investment fund, probably the biggest one, which was founded by Haris Švarts. You have I already mentioned Lords LB, East 9, East Capital, Baltic Horizon. So for funds like this, Baltic Horizon is more into retail. So yeah. So these are like movers and shakers. Of course, there is. If you speak about retail and who owns the shopping centers, you have to make that list wider. But basically, your question was who is investing, who are the movers and shakers. These are basically Lithuanians, Estonians, Swedes, and Finns.
Yeah.
That is who in Latvia's not residential, but real estate market. As I'm in the habit of joking with my members that it's not like you come to Latvia. And if you meet the management of the companies which are like active in Latvia, you don't have like guys like Juris, Andris, and so you have Frode, Mindaugas, Tavi, and guys named like that. But of course, I mean, there is the management of the companies is obviously Latvian dominated, because real estate is very connected with the regulation, with local regulation, and you have to, in order to really be in charge of real estate development, you have to know the local regulation, territory planning, construction code, and etc.
Yeah. Before you answered the question already in your answer, I wanted to ask for those of the audience who do not know who are the native Latvian companies. Maybe you can name them, but you already did the Pillar and the MBC as the native companies. Maybe.
Well, there are some more. So what we have, like Pillar probably is the largest real estate developer who is of Latvian origin. Then you have LNK properties, but they do some residential and basically B class offices.
And industrial as well.
So some industrial probably as well. I'm not aware if LNK does really industrial. Okay, perhaps some industrial. Yeah. Okay, then what you have, Picha is a serious developer founded by Pēters Sinhans, who is one of these kind of self-made guys in the real estate segment in Latvia. He's doing fine. You may know the projects near to the airport, the Lidostas parks, like Lidostas Park, where some of the unicorns are even based. I think Printful is there.
Yeah.
That's some Chinese companies are there, and he's one of those really self-made guys in the Latvian real estate industry. So what else we have? Okay, you mentioned Mūksols Business Centers. There's Klaus Vasks with his colleagues. That's one company. Well, there are some smaller companies. Of course, there is the owners, the Karlsons, so the family of Justs Karlsons, who owned the Berga Bazaars property and some historical properties, and have done, I think, great job in renovating some part of the Riga historical center. So yeah, these are basically, that is the map of Latvian developers, investors.
Mm-hmm. Since 17th March of 2021, Latvia is not the same in the eyes of real estate developers and investors. Can you elaborate a bit more about the purpose and benefits of the new rent law that you was also part of in the making process?
In terms of real estate regulation, the rental regulation is probably one of those hard to change, hard to move, hard to modify things or factors that affect the real estate market. Well, our previous rental regulation was adopted, I think, in 1993 or something like that. Basically, Latvia had just regained its independence, and of course, this large-scale restitution of historical properties, which were confiscated by the Soviet occupation authorities. So these properties were returned to their legitimate owners. Yes. So basically, people who had inherited these properties. Many of them were in the emigration, were in Latvians in exile. And in order to avoid a situation where there is basically a new landlord, new owner of a building which previously was owned by the Soviet Union or by Soviet Latvia. So the rental law, which was adopted in 1993, was very sort of tenant-centric. So it basically said that the landlord, unless you reach some kind of agreement, and even if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, you can of course bring him to court and so. But it would take years to evict the tenant if it was even possible, like legally, and so. And this was a situation which, I mean, that was, let's say, historically legitimate at the time, but now if like 20 almost 30 years have passed, and we have a situation when we need investment in new rental housing, basically such product as rental housing is not exactly available in Riga. Not many institutional funds had invested in rental housing, and they didn't invest because partly because of the rental law or the rental regulation. So I mean, if you are a brand new investor who has like 100 tenants, and if 25% of them decide not to pay rent, what will you tell your bank or your investors? Basically, we will have to undergo 5 years of litigation before we can receive any payment. I mean, who will invest in such circumstances? Nobody. It's just like it was like absolutely clear that this sort of the balance between the rights of the tenant and the rights of the landlord had to be established. And this is where the new rental regulation, new rental law, to be precise, new law on residential tenancy comes into picture. So we were one of the organizations which was very much behind that regulation. So basically the idea is this: if the new thing was that the new principle, new philosophy, one may say, and this philosophy is this: if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, you can evict the tenant. It kind of makes sense, like it's your property, and it's like these are two sort of parties which have mutually agreed to one to rent out the premises and the other one to pay the rent. So yes. So this is what basically the new rental regulation in Latvia has, and it will, instead of 5 years, it normally takes now 3 months, maybe 4 or 5 months to evict a tenant which doesn't pay the rent. And you can see the market has reacted to that. There are many companies, not many, but several major investors in real estate, like SG Capital, which has established a rental investment fund. You have EFTEN with rental investment fund. You have Bonava and YIT working on their arrangements with Lumi Capital and others. So basically, you see that's, I think, an interesting example that you don't need some sort of European money, you don't need some sort of state subsidy in order to spur economic growth and investment. You basically just amend the regulation, you change the law, where basically everybody is benefiting. I think even tenants benefit from a clear regulation, because what was the situation previously? If there is no sort of legal or let's say constructive way of how to resolve dispute between the landlord and the tenant, then the conflict resolution sort of gets pulled into some sort of gray zone, where you have, the heating has been switched off for some tenants, or and these kind of mechanisms which institutional investors would never resort to. Because it's like it's not in, if you're a publicly quoted company, you can't switch off heating in January for your tenants, So basically, I think this is good for everybody, good for investment, good for housing affordability, and there is investment coming into rental housing in Riga right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember at the end of 2021 in the World Latvian Economics and Innovations Forum, you mentioned in your presentation that Riga is way ahead of Stockholm, Helsinki, and Copenhagen in terms of yields from residential buildings. Has the situation changed in any direction during the past 18 months, or do we still hold this attractive position?
Well, we definitely hold that. That's interesting. That was one of the investment funds which explained to me, and it makes sense, I think, that if you look at real estate, at various real estate businesses and properties, and look at them in an investment product perspective, then basically the lowest yields, which means that the product is the most reliable and is sort of the most sustainable, and so they think that it is residential rental, so rental housing essentially. Because, in terms of offices or retail, well, COVID has shown that there can be some fluctuations in terms of demand and so, but like housing, basically, like this is like a basic necessity. People will always need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of makes sense. And therefore residential rental returns are among the lowest in residential, in real estate and investment environment. Yeah, of course, if you compare Riga to countries like or cities like Stockholm or Munich or what's the capital of Switzerland?
Bern.
No, I was thinking about
Zurich.
Zurich is probably not capital.
Yeah.
Usually it's like, when you look at those rates, okay, not now when we have interest rates basically are high, and therefore the returns are lower. But it's interesting that it's not directly reflected into the returns of real estate products, because many investment funds don't have it in their mandate that they could buy, for instance, the bonds or bonds of Hungary or something. They need to buy real estate, and so it's not like the returns of real estate. It's not like always 6, 7, or 8%. Yeah, but if you look at Zurich, Stockholm, or Munich, or whatever, it's usually around 2% something, 1 point something, which means how highly investment funds, usually investment funds with pension capital, value these kinds of investment. They think that they're basically,
anchoring the money.
Basically, it's like it's safe. Nothing can happen, and that's a stable cash flow. And so, because I don't know if everybody who's listening to this podcast knows. Basically, the interest rate, so returns on real estate product, essentially means this: if you, let's say, if you have a rental property in Zurich and rental property in Riga, so if you invest 100 euros in that property in Zurich, you expect to get an annual return of 2 euros.
Mm-hmm.
If you invest these 100 euros in Riga, you would normally get probably not 6 now, but 5.5 euros. So it's if you invest in Zurich or in Stockholm, you get 2 euros annually from your 100 euros. And if you invest in Riga, you get 5.5 euros.
Almost 3 times more.
It's almost 3 times. And in that sense, Riga is a much better destination for your investment. And if you sort of diversify your investment profile, then Baltics, I think, and residential in the Baltics is a way to go, because there is I mean, if you look at the general numbers, for instance, Eurostat, then, for instance, I think in Europe, on average, there are 30% of households which are in the rental market, which are basically 30% of all people of all households rent their apartment or the house. In Riga, it's in Latvia, I think it's about 15% or 17%, something like that. So basically, no, I think it's 20, not 17. It's around 20. So basically, if you sort of if you view it in a sort of convergence perspective with the EU average, then there is a potential for a growth of 50% at least in terms of residential rental.
Yeah, which is like roughly 100,000, maybe.
Yeah, something like. Well, I think we have 1 million. Basically, there is 1 million housing sort of the units of housing, so both apartments and the houses in Latvia. I think more than 300,000 are in Riga. So yeah, well, 20, 30, around that figure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what else can Riga as the capital and Latvia as the country in general can offer to real estate developers in Baltic Sea region?
Well, I think better returns is sort of quite important because people are usually in this thing because of the money, and so I think, well, what Riga can offer. I mean, like, just to step back a moment, it's usually, I don't know, have you had this experience with foreigners in Latvia, but usually those people, especially even from Sweden or Germany or Switzerland, who come to Riga and it is their first visit, are usually super surprised. This is a beautiful city. Well, there is rivers, there is life going on. That it's a proper city. It doesn't feel small. It feels the right size. So it's like there is this kind of. I think there is a Riga is better than people think. That's one thing for sure. I mean, one usually tells about the connectivity of Riga and the airport and all the airfare destinations, airline destinations that we have. But I mean, if we look at specifically at real estate development, I think the probably there are two directions in which investment in Riga is needed and justified. The first one is, which we touched upon already, is housing. I think when you look at Riga, I mean the development of housing has been not sufficient, to say the least. in the last 10 years, for instance. I mean, if you look at the basic figures, so in Lithuania, in the last 10 years, 45,000 new apartments have been commissioned. In Estonia, 37,000 apartments have been commissioned, and in Riga and Latvia, 15,000. So 1-5. In Lithuania, 45, Estonia, 37, Riga, 1-5, so 15. I mean, and one could say perhaps there is not sufficient demand for housing in Latvia. I'm not sure that's the case because for instance, 72% of Rigans live in Soviet-era housing. I mean, this is a housing which was basically constructed for Soviet-era people. I mean, and so I think it has become both physically and morally, as we say, obsolete. And not much investment has gone into that kind of housing, and probably not all housing of that era deserve investment. It should be vacated, I think, and people just should move to some quality modern housing. So there is let's say a structural demand for modern, contemporary, energy efficient, sustainable housing in Riga, and no matter even if our demographics basically stays the same, I think there is a structural demand for housing in Riga, and developers would be wise to serve it. So that's one segment. And of course, in terms of office development, I mean, Riga is someone told me in Stockholm that of all people who work in Stockholm, 82% work in an office. So and this is explained by the fact that cities like Stockholm, Riga, or Helsinki, or Tallinn, or Vilnius, their economy is service-based economy. You have manufacturing outside of the major cities, and the capital city is usually a service-based economy. This is IT, all the communication, finance, and what have you. And for service-based economy, offices are the infrastructure. Like for air travels, this is airports. For transits, it is roads and railroads. For service-based economy, it is offices. So in that way, actually, real estate is very much connected to the, let's say, to what the value added in the products and in the economy that a city sort of deals in is concerned. So basically, and if you look at the basic numbers, I think in Vilnius now, so the average square footage of office space per one inhabitant of the city, or per one company that is registered in the city, is twice as big as in Riga.
Oh, okay.
And there is a clear and I mean, and even if we look at Riga now and see all these big office developments like Preses Nams Verde, Elementals Kanste, this Galio development in VEF, and Mūkusalas business centers and other projects, still, I mean, Lithuanians are doing very well. And they're still investing in new offices. And I think that's one thing which I think it was one Lithuanian investor who remarked that in Vilnius now, if you are a serious company which purports to attract talent and be a good proposition for their employees, so like an A-class office, which has a good architecture, which has a good environment, all this sort of air supply and so on. It is basically a must. Mm. It's a factor of hygiene, as they say. Yeah? Mm. But in Riga still there are many companies which are housed in offices which are second rate at best. So, but what we see, interestingly enough, is that all the new office buildings which have been commissioned in Riga, basically they're rented out. Mm-hmm. So there is clearly a structural demand for offices too, and we are just undergoing this process with a sort of 5 to 7 year delay compared to Vilnius and Tallinn. So yeah, basically housing, especially I think economy housing, and probably some sort of quality housing, waterfront development, something nice that you see in Tallinn, in Noblesner, or in Vilnius, and also offices. I think these are two underserved sectors of the real estate in Riga.
Yeah, and do you see this status that Riga has as the student capital of the Baltics? Could that be also a driving force for future success and more development around that area, which is the left bank of Riga?
Well, I hope that all those people who are students in Latvia stay in Latvia. Mm-hmm. That would be great. I think that's one way of improving our demographics. I would look at. Now, you can clearly see there is the first project, which is basically on the University of Latvia campus. It's called SHED,
also
living.
Klaus Vasks and One Asset Management.
Yeah, and it's Klaus Vasks was basically the developer, but it's a Lithuanian company which operates it, and there's some other. I mean, this is one of those areas in which actually Riga has a lead over Vilnius and Tallinn in terms of how many international students are in the city. I think in Riga there are at least 12,000 or something, but I may not have the correct number, but it's significantly more than Vilnius and Tallinn, which is interesting. I've just once so basically if the demographic trends of Latvia are such that in the next coming 10 years, there will be some shortage of domestic students. The only way for Riga Technical University or the University of Latvia to basically to work at their current capacity is to attract international students. Yeah. Where basically there is no other way for them to survive in these circumstances. So basically there are strong drivers for attracting international students. And there is strong incentives for our institutions of higher education to do so. So I think that is where developers could look at too.
Because all of these students will need housing, and if they stay in Latvia, they'll need offices.
Sure, I mean I mean, I think it was Pēters Strautiņš, the chief economist at Luminor Latvia, who told that basically the success formula for Riga is very simple. So you need like offices where service-based economy can create its services. So and those people who work in these offices, they need housing where they can live. So basically, offices and housing, it's like just for Riga to prosper.
Yeah. And are there any specific parts of Riga that require special attention from real estate investors and developers within 5 to 10 year perspective, in your opinion? Maybe I can share my own vision in that regard as well.
Oh, you start.
Okay, well, currently I see that Zaķisala has very much untapped potential because it's literally located directly between the, so to speak, knowledge mile, which is the Ķīpsala, and the Latvian University, and also the Library of Latvia, which is one of the most significant projects of this century, not in Latvia, but in Baltics. And if we connected that bank with Zaķisala, I think it would have a great dynamic. We can maybe add the stop of Rail Baltica there as well, and it could create this very dynamic atmosphere in there. There's just like one part that has made a place in my mind.
Well, I think if you were to interview a representative of Marx, yes, they would be very happy with that assessment, since they own like basically one half of that all that Zaķisala.
I've seen their proposals.
Yes, they have actually a very nice housing development plans there. They have local plan there, and so I think and there is actually in place a plan to connect Zaķisala, the far, which is that is I think the northern part of Zaķisala to the Rail Baltica bridge. I think there is a connection. Yes, there are plans like this. I mean, now what I concur with you on is that I think basically the waterfront property should be developed in Riga. That is, I think, something that has been slightly, slightly forgotten. Even though all the city planning documents, if you look at city development, city urban planning documents, city development programs, and so all they speak about the need for Riga to develop waterfront properties so that people could live by the water, people could enjoy water, and so. But not much has been done in that regard. Let's be fair about that. So I think that is one way of, like, general way of looking because I mean, if you speak about quality housing, people normally want to live where you can see water, where there's some greenery around, and so that is one sort of as a general rule I would look at it. But I mean, I think but generally I would say the central part of Riga should be developed. I mean, we have this railway, as you call it, this railway, not loop, but basically this zone which of the Riga center, which is marked by and punctuated by the railway lines. So, I mean, because if you look generally at what has happened to Riga in the last 20 years, you see that the center of Riga, this population of the center of Riga has declined, I think, by 40%, so 40. The population of Riga in its administrative borders has declined by 16%, 1/6, but all the suburbs of Riga, Mārupe, Ādaži, Ķekava, all these, they have grown by some 12% or 15% or something. In some instances, as Mārupe and Ķekava and Ādaži, by 300%, and so. Because what Latvians normally have, there is this Latvian dream of owning a house in Mārupe, and having a dog, like a Volvo SUV, and on the way to Mārupe, you basically may stop by Spice or other shopping center to do your purchases, and this has been the Latvian dream.
Similar to the Sweden Wolf,
yes, that's exactly, yeah. So I think this is about to change. At least the new leaders of Riga are very much behind the idea of making the Riga city center more people friendly, so that people could just live there, shop there, and so we have. I think there are many nice areas around the Riga city center, and I include Skanste in the city center too, basically, which is a good location for offices and residential and other types of developments. But also you have, like you mentioned, Zaķusola, you have Ķīpsola, you have Āgenskalns, which is a very nice place, and so basically, I think in general, I think water. So anything that is near water is deserving more attention in Riga.
During the past 2 years, we have witnessed many new development projects in Riga, starting from Riga Center and Skanste all the way to Āgenskalns and Teika. Which of the projects do you consider among the most successful? And maybe you can include some for the perspective from Estonia and Lithuania as well.
Well, I mean, I have a conflict of interest. I mean, I'm not sure I should express my personal preferences, but obviously there are the projects which have won acclaim from international experts and have received several awards. Well, you have, I think, Verde is very successful as an office development. I think in terms of residential, I think Mārtiņš Vanags is a great project, and so in terms of there are many probably if I had to single out, I probably would single out these two, but there are many quality projects in Riga. What is obviously when you go to Vilnius, you see this Konstitūcijas, this avenue. I mean, there is basically this exhibition of modern office buildings, starting with what is called K29, I think, and basically there's a project of Daniel Libeskin now in Vilnius, basically what was previously planned as a hotel. Now it's an office tower. Actually, there's a project. Hanner does a project with. I think it's designed by Zaha Hadid, the office of Zaha Hadid. Zaha Hadid, of course, passed away, but her office still lives. And they have a swimming pool on the top floor. That's a kind of interesting kind of office development with a swimming pool on the top, like Olympic-sized
like in Dubai.
Swimming pool, something like that. I mean, but it's like, no, but that people will swim. I swim too. If I had an office there, that would be important for me. That's cool. That's a nice thing to have. I mean, in that's what Hanner is developing now in Vilnius. And so I think Paupis in Vilnius as a residential project, it's a very good example of how projects should be done. And in Estonia, I think what Marko is doing in Noblessner, these are very good, like waterfront projects, waterfront properties. Everything, all that has happened and has taken place in Ulemiste city, I think it's very good. It's a very good development, and also in Tallinn, I think I would say that they are ahead of Riga in terms of developing waterfront properties. That is clear.
Yeah. How has the alliance of real estate developers in Latvia helped the real estate market throughout the last decade? Can you maybe give us some comment on what has been improved, like in general lines, and what are your current plans in this regard for the future years?
I think our three main our main achievements are at least three. One is already mentioned, the new residential. So the new rental law, the new law on residential tenancy. That is basically a game changer for Latvian real estate development environment and business environment. The second I would mention is the fast-track procedure at the Riga City Council, or the Green Corridor as we call it. So basically it is the first instance in Latvia when let's say like big investment projects are singled out. This investment projects include office developments and residential developments of at least 100 apartments, and they are treated differently. They have a fast-track procedure with the city construction board, and you have many sort of benefits in terms of how you can get approvals for these kinds of projects, and so this is what we argued for years, and the new Riga City Council, thanks to Mārtiņš Vanags and Vilnis Ķirsis, approved this. So that's the second thing, and the third I would mention. I think what I was personally very much behind this state support scheme for shopping centers during COVID. I think this is something that investors should note, that Latvian government was one of the few ones in Europe which provided direct subsidy to shopping centers to compensate for the revenue lost due to the restrictions in terms of shopping center attendance. I mean, say what you want about shopping centers, but I mean, in terms of it was not their fault that the footfall had fallen, fell. So it was because of the virus and because of the restrictions that the government adopted, and simply we managed to convince the government, providing clear numbers, that there is this drop in revenue, and you should other instruments that were in place to compensate to companies the losses due to COVID. We're not able to cover those losses. So we managed to get a special program, and the shopping centers received, I think, at least 20 million euros in compensations. There were some other things which were just like which, for instance, the sale of property stamp duty, which was 2% in Latvia and wasn't capped. So basically, if you sold a property worth of like 100 million euros, you had to pay a stamp duty of 2 million euros. Means that for an investor it's like a tax. It's not duty, not a duty. Now it's capped at 50,000 euros. This is something which is important for big investors, and many other smaller things. In terms of what we are working on currently is this fast-track procedure at Riga City Council. We would like it to be expanded in order to cover also engineering network and utility network holders, because nowadays you experience less problems at the city construction board, and you have more delays with, for instance, the city traffic department of transportation, which is responsible for rainwater sewage systems and all the roads and junctures and so on. And also with Riga Water Company, Rigas Ūdens, which is responsible for sewage and water supply. And this is usually an issue. So we want these big investment projects to receive, let's say, special treatment with these utility network holders too. There is a talk of a reform of real estate taxation in Latvia. There are some ideas to, for instance, perhaps that only land should be taxed, but that this idea, which is the case in Estonia, there are no properties, no buildings are taxed, only land. But this idea has been discarded. But there is some ideas of adopting the Czech model, for instance, where basically there is no this cadastral value, but there is a sort of administratively set value for 1 square meter. And it is and that value is adjusted depending in which area of the city you are. For instance, in Kangerax you would pay like 0.3 of that, and Mešparks perhaps 2.5 or something. So this is one thing which may reduce bureaucracy significantly in Latvia in terms of all this system of cadastral surveying and so real estate taxation. So what we also would like to have, I mean, we started our conversation with the situation which is currently, I think, very serious for apartment prices. I think one way of supporting like housing affordability would be to reduce VAT for new apartments. Yeah. There are I think 6 or 7 countries in the EU which have reduced VAT for new housing. That's Hungary, Poland, Italy, the Netherlands, some other countries as well. So, for instance, if you would reduce the effective rate of 21% to 5%, that would spur the affordability of modern housing and investment in that kind of housing, because we talked about that this sort of the effective mortgage rate has risen from 300 euros to 600 euros. By reducing VAT, you would essentially lower it to 500 euros if you count in. So, I mean, these are the kind of topics we are currently discussing. So, and I think one thing which is important, there are these new modern office developments in Riga, and in addition, with the demand from the private sector, the demand from the public sector should be encouraged. For instance, we have all the state institutions, ministries, state-owned companies. Many of them have like second-rate offices. They have trouble attracting employees. And so they could be tenants in these offices, like they do in Vilnius. I think Vilnius's municipality is even renting, office for them, and many state-owned and municipal companies in Tallinn as well. In Ulemiste, we mentioned Ulemiste. I think the tax I think it's their customs and tax administration have their offices in a commercial development in Ulemiste. So I think there is a room for the public sector institutions to present themselves as tenants in commercial premises, office premises in Riga. Okay. So this is roughly the roadmap.
And what is your main message to real estate investors and developers in Baltic Sea region?
Baltic Sea region. I think it's interesting. I was in a conference last week in Vilnius. This is the main event in Lithuania, and there was this Swedish guy. And there were Lithuanians and Estonians and Latvians. They were slightly skeptical how things are in the Baltics, and the Swede said that basically, I mean, he is very bullish about the Baltic states, because I mean, if you look at where Baltic states were 30 years ago and where are they now, it's like that has been that's been a stark success to his mind. And basically, I mean, all the fundamentals are there. The cities are are good. They're well designed. People have, they're like, people strive to get education. All our economies are moving up the food chain in terms of value added, and so it's like, I think the fundamentals are there. And for investors, it's usually that investors from Western Europe, they look at Poland and Germany or something like that. But the Baltic states taken together, I think is basically a good investment destination. And I mean, if we will grow as we did in the last 30 years, the next 30 years, your investment will be more than fine.
Okay, and is there any other message for the new generation of the real estate market movers in Baltic states?
Go into real estate and do real estate development. Not only brokerage or something, but real real estate development, because real estate development means that you invest in new housing, you build new offices, you invest in retail, you invest in logistics, in warehouses, in hotels. You do the your real investment work. I mean, it's actually a pity that it has been slightly. I mean, it's very good that we have foreign investors and international investors believe in Riga's market, but the fact that there is such a scarcity of local developers, I think that is what young people could change. Young people could change that situation.
Okay, and where can people find you?
Well, everybody can feel free to email me. It's martins.vanags@niaa, like nekustamā īpašuma attīstītāja alianse, niaa.lv. Email is my preferred way of communicating.
Okay, I appreciate this conversation, Mārtiņ. Thank you for sharing your time with me and Baltic Landlords. Thank you.
Thanks. Paldies.